Rain-slicked streets reflected the neon haze of the city above, a patchwork of colors that never quite reached the alleys where 15-year-old Kale crouched. He was lean, wiry, and coated in grime that no amount of scavenged water could wash away. His stomach growled in rhythm with the distant hum of hovercars, a constant reminder that survival here demanded more than wit. It demanded speed, cunning, and an almost desperate hope that luck might favor him today. Kale's eyes darted along the alley walls, scanning for the patrolling enforcers who occasionally swept through looking for loiterers, street kids, and anyone unfortunate enough to attract attention. He moved silently, a shadow among shadows, careful not to jostle the stack of crates he had claimed as a makeshift bed the previous night. The city had no room for weakness, and he had learned that the hard way. Orphaned at 12, discarded by a society that thrived on commerce and conformity, Kale had become an expert in the art of survival. Yet despite the grime, the hunger, and the endless nights shivering under neon lights, Kale carried a secret, a hunger for something far bigger than scraps and shelter. While other street kids dreamed of petty thefts and quick escapes, Kale dreamed of stars. He had watched from the edges of derelict landing pads as massive ships glided into orbit, their hulls gleaming with promise. To him, they were symbols of freedom, of a life beyond the endless corridors of metal and concrete. He longed to belong somewhere beyond the city, somewhere unbounded, where he could rewrite the narrative that had left him invisible. Today, that longing carried him toward the edge of the spaceport district, a place where traders haggled over rusted freighters and abandoned vessels. Kale moved with caution, eyes wide, ears tuned to every conversation. He had learned to listen, really listen. The world often revealed its secrets to those who paid attention. That's when he heard it, a conversation low and hurried, yet ripe with opportunity. Abandoned vessels going for next week's auction. Barely functional, whole shot, but someone might snap it up for a song, a scruffy merchant muttered to a buyer, glancing over his shoulder as though fear of eavesdroppers kept him on edge. Kale's heart thumped. Barely functional? That was all he needed. He had seen ships in far worse shape, and with the right touch, the right ingenuity, he could breathe life into it. A plan began to form, a fragile spark amidst the storm of hunger and survival instincts. He had no money, no credits to speak of, but he had resourcefulness, cunning, and a willingness to gamble everything for a chance at something greater. Over the next few days, Kale executed a series of small, careful heists, a bag of supplies from an inattentive trader, a stolen access key from a distracted dock worker, a handful of valuable scraps sold quietly in the black market. Each small success fueled his growing confidence and allowed him to accumulate enough credits to participate in the auction. It was risky, reckless even, but Kale had long ago decided that risk was preferable to the slow erosion of hope. When the day of the auction arrived, Kale blended into the crowd, unnoticed but observant. The vessel was everything the Whispers had promised, dust-laden, dented, and abandoned, yet imposing in its size. Others scoffed, dismissing it as worthless, a relic of a time when the galaxy had been less cautious. Kale, however, saw potential. Every scar on its hull told a story. Every creak of its doors hinted at secrets waiting to be uncovered. To him, it wasn't garbage, it was possibility. With a hand steady despite the adrenaline hammering in his chest, Kale placed his bid. Low, cautious, measured, but enough to secure the vessel. The auctioneer barked in surprise, but rules were rules, and by the end of the day, the ship belonged to a 15-year-old street orphan. Kale barely slept that night, staring at the dim outline of the ship docked in a quiet corner, already imagining the life he could craft within its metal walls. As he ran his fingers along the cold, scratched surface, he whispered a vow to himself. He would not merely survive. He would build, he would explore, and he would prove that even the smallest, most overlooked human could carve a place in the stars. Somewhere beyond the city, beyond the alleys, beyond the judgment of those who had abandoned him, Kale would make his mark. The city slept, indifferent as ever, but Kale felt a spark of something new, a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination. He was on the edge of a journey that could either elevate him beyond the streets or consume him entirely. Either way, he knew one truth with absolute clarity: his life would never be ordinary again. Kale spent the first hours simply exploring the freighter. The interior smelled of burned circuits and dust, with panels hanging loose from the ceiling and cables snaking across the floor like mechanical vines. The ship groaned under its own weight, each creak a warning, yet Kale felt a thrill he had never known. This was no longer a relic to be feared. It was a challenge, a puzzle, and a chance to prove himself. He began in the cargo bay, the largest compartment, where crates had toppled over and the hull walls bore scratches from decades of neglect. Using his scavenged tools, he reinforced the support beams, patched minor holes, and rigged temporary power lines. Every fix was improvised, every solution the product of a mind accustomed to necessity. Kale worked methodically, mindful that one wrong move could short a circuit or tear a vital line. But he had survived the streets by thinking fast and acting faster, and that instinct guided him here. Next came the ship's systems. The navigation console flickered weakly, screens sputtering with static. Kale crouched over it, tracing circuits, reconnecting frayed wires and rerouting power where it had been lost. Old logs glowed dimly on the terminal, remnants of a crew long gone. He read snippets of missions, coordinates, and routine maintenance checks, imagining the lives of those who had flown this vessel. He felt a strange kinship with them, outsiders in their own way, tied to a ship that was more than metal. Life support proved a more daunting task. The oxygen recyclers were rusted, the filters clogged beyond repair. Kale scavenged spare parts from the dock, rigged improvised filtration systems, and relied on salvaged energy cells to keep the machinery running. Hours bled into days, and Kale often found himself curled in the shadowed corners, exhausted but unwilling to stop. The freighter was more than a ship. It was becoming a sanctuary, a place where he could build a future beyond the suffocating city. Engine repairs were the true test. The main drive had seized, a massive tangle of corroded metal and tangled fuel conduits. Kale spent entire nights studying it, consulting fragments of manuals he had pilfered from traders. He devised a makeshift ignition sequence, using jury-rigged fuel injectors and recalibrated conduits to coax the engine into life. The first attempt ended with a hiss of escaping steam and a shower of sparks, but Kale's grin was unshaken. Failure was a lesson, not a deterrent. As the ship began to hum faintly with energy, Kale ventured onto the bridge. The viewport framed the city below like a miniature galaxy, a reminder of what he had left behind and what he was striving for. He imagined navigating asteroid belts, slipping through pirate blockades, and charting systems beyond the edges of known space. The ship responded to his touch, almost as if it recognized his determination. It was still rough, incomplete, but it was alive, and Kale was its heart. Despite the progress, Kale faced isolation. He had no mentor, no ally to offer guidance or reassurance. Nights were the hardest, when fatigue weighed heavily and the freighter's groans became a chorus of doubt. Yet every obstacle he overcame strengthened him. He rewired the power conduits, stabilized the hull, and restored partial communications arrays. Each success was a small victory, a proof that ingenuity and determination could transform the seemingly impossible into reality. Rumors of the kid with the freighter began to circulate among the spaceport traders. Some laughed, dismissing it as juvenile foolishness. Others watched with wary interest, curious if he could truly make the vessel fly. Kale paid them no mind. The freighter was his challenge, his opportunity, and his rebellion against the limits the galaxy had tried to impose. It wasn't about impressing others. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above circumstances that had once seemed insurmountable. Finally, the day came when the engines sputtered to life. A low, resonant hum filled the freighter, vibrating through the metal floor and into Kale's chest. It was imperfect, uneven, and dangerously unstable in sections, yet it was movement, a promise that the ship could carry him beyond the city, beyond the streets that had shaped him. His hands shook as he ran the system's check, heart hammering with a mix of fear and exhilaration. The freighter responded, and for the first time, Kale allowed himself to imagine actual flight. He maneuvered the vessel into the outer dock lanes, dodging maintenance platforms and hovering cargo pods. The city blurred below, its endless lights and shadows merging into streaks as Kale coaxed the ship forward. It shuddered, complained, and sputtered, but it moved. He was not just a street orphan anymore. He was a pilot, an engineer, and the master of a vessel that had once been forgotten. As the freighter lifted higher, skimming the edges of low orbit, Kale allowed a brief smile to cross his face. The city, with all its hunger, grime, and indifference, fell away beneath him. For the first time in years, he felt unbound, capable, and alive. Yet he also knew the galaxy beyond would not be as forgiving. Pirates, mercenaries, and traders with less scruple than he possessed waited among the stars. The freighter, magnificent as it had become, was still a target, and Kale, despite his skill, was still just 15. But as he studied the controls and watched the city shrink beneath him, he realized something vital. He was no longer bound by fear alone. With his ingenuity, courage, and the freighter at his command, he could carve a place in the galaxy that had once ignored him. And though the challenges ahead were unknown, he felt ready to face them, one calculated risk at a time. For Kale, survival was no longer enough. The freighter was more than metal and circuits. It was freedom, it was potential, and it was the first step toward a life that could astonish not only himself, but the galaxy beyond. Kale had never left the orbital fringe of his city before, yet here he was, navigating the freighter through uncharted lanes of the system. The stars were no longer distant lights. They stretched in brilliant arrays beyond the viewport, punctuated by drifting cargo ships and the occasional miner skimming an asteroid belt. Every flicker of the freighter's instruments reminded him of the fragility of his triumph. The engines still strained, the hull still groaned, but the exhilaration outweighed the fear. The first challenge came sooner than he expected. A small pirate vessel appeared on the scanner, a dark silhouette against the asteroid-lit void. Kale froze only for a moment before recalling every evasive maneuver he had practiced in simulations and half-remembered schematics. He altered the freighter's trajectory, weaving between rocky debris and fragments of forgotten satellites, coaxing the sluggish engines to respond. The pirates fired, lasers arcing past the hull, scorching the freighter's exterior, but Kale's improvisation kept him just out of reach. By the time he found a narrow path through the asteroid field, the pirates had given up, leaving him with trembling hands and a racing pulse. That encounter, brief as it was, marked a turning point. Word of the freighter and its young pilot began to spread among traders and wayfarers. Some were dismissive, mocking the audacity of a child commanding a vessel that had once been considered junk. Others watched with curiosity, whispering about Kale's resourcefulness and daring. In every conversation, every glance, Kale felt both scrutiny and recognition. The galaxy was noticing him, and not always kindly. He decided to test the freighter further. Beyond the asteroid belt lay the uncharted systems that littered the edges of known trade routes. Kale charted a course toward an abandoned research station orbiting a dying star, a place rumored to contain salvageable tech that could improve the freighter's performance. Each mile of space brought new obstacles. Micrometeors tore at shields, the navigation systems faltered under electromagnetic storms, and communication with distant outposts remained unreliable. Kale adapted, patching systems mid-flight, recalibrating sensors, and improvising fixes with the scraps he had carried from the city. Every problem solved strengthened his confidence. Every successful maneuver reminded him that ingenuity often outweighed experience. At the research station, Kale discovered remnants of alien technology, instruments and modules far beyond the designs he had encountered before. He studied them carefully, reverse engineering components and integrating them into the freighter where possible. Some devices hummed with energy too alien to fully understand, yet Kale's instincts guided him in wiring circuits and stabilizing power conduits. The freighter began to respond differently. Smoother acceleration, greater energy efficiency, and new capabilities that no conventional vessel in the sector possessed. It was no longer just a salvaged ship. It was an extension of Kale's mind and skill, a tangible proof of what human ingenuity could achieve. Kale's reputation began to spread faster than he anticipated. Traders he had aided, pirates he had evaded, and explorers who had glimpsed the freighter in distant sectors started sharing tales of the boy who had taken a derelict and made it extraordinary. Some envied him, some doubted him, and some sought to challenge him. Kale knew that admiration and danger often traveled the same path, and he prepared accordingly, reinforcing the hull and upgrading defensive systems whenever possible. One encounter highlighted the scale of the challenges ahead. A corporate patrol vessel, vast and armed, intercepted him in the fringe of a disputed trade sector. They demanded identification, maintenance logs, and proof of ownership. Kale, with nerves taut but mind sharp, navigated the freighter through intricate maneuvers, using his knowledge of the ship's quirks to evade scanning fields and energy nets. The patrol could not predict the sudden bursts of acceleration, the tight twists through gravitational anomalies, or the improvised decoys he had fashioned from old cargo drones. By the time the vessel relented, Kale had vanished into the folds of the star system, leaving stunned observers to question how a child could command such mastery over a vessel considered unworthy by seasoned crews. Despite the victories, Kale remained aware of the risks. Each system he explored carried new threats, territorial disputes, pirate enclaves, and uncharted hazards that could tear the freighter apart if miscalculated. Yet every success reinforced a truth he had known since the city streets. Human determination and creativity could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Every mile he traveled, every challenge he faced, made the freighter not just a vessel of survival, but a symbol of human potential. Kale's nights in space were different from those in the city. There was no constant roar of hovercars, no threat of enforcers rounding the corner. Instead, there was silence, punctuated by the occasional hum of the freighter's systems. In that quiet, Kale reflected on how far he had come. He was still 15, still alone, yet he commanded a ship capable of feats few adults could manage. He realized that the galaxy, vast and indifferent, was now watching, and he intended to prove that humanity could meet it head-on. As he adjusted the course for another uncharted sector, a flicker on the communication console drew his attention. A transmission, garbled but intelligible, reached him from a merchant convoy under attack. They were desperate, surrounded by raiders, and their distress signal carried hope that Kale could respond. Without hesitation, he altered the freighter's path, preparing to test not only the ship but himself in the crucible of real danger. For Kale, the freighter had become more than a machine. It was a partner, a manifestation of his ingenuity, courage, and determination. And as the stars stretched endlessly before him, he understood that the true measure of his journey was only beginning. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but with each challenge he overcame, Kale's legend grew, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test both the freighter and its young pilot in ways that no street or spaceport had ever demanded. Kale had charted courses that few dared to attempt, yet nothing in his experience could prepare him for the fleet that now appeared on the freighter's sensors. Corporate enforcers, sleek and heavily armed, blocked the passage through the trade corridor. Their lead vessel dwarfed his freighter, bristling with weapons arrays, scanners, and enough firepower to obliterate a city block. Kale's heart raced, but his mind sharpened. Fear was a tool, not a chain. He studied the freighter's capabilities, every modification, every jury-rig system he had installed. He knew the engine's quirks, the hull's weaknesses, and the hidden redundancies he had woven into its circuits. This wasn't just a ship, it was a manifestation of his ingenuity, creativity, and perseverance. And Kale had no intention of surrendering it, or himself, to those who underestimated him. The first shots rang out, cutting through the void like streaks of violent light. Kale gritted his teeth, twisting the controls with precision. He weaved through asteroid debris, coaxing the freighter into tight, impossible maneuvers. Lasers glanced off improvised deflectors, and decoy drones he had salvaged from distant wrecks flared outward, drawing fire away from the main hull. The enforcers were powerful, methodical, but they had not anticipated the mind of a 15-year-old pilot who thought like the streets, fast, unpredictable, and relentless. Kale countered their advances with improvisation. He rerouted energy from life support to the main engines, boosting speed and acceleration in short bursts. Hidden compartments released clouds of nanite particles he had scavenged from an abandoned research station, temporarily blinding enemy sensors. Every move was calculated, yet fluid, instinctual. He wasn't just surviving, he was orchestrating chaos with purpose. The lead enforcer's flagship attempted a direct boarding maneuver, lowering magnetic clamps to latch onto the freighter's hull. Kale anticipated it. A carefully timed burst from the auxiliary thrusters sent the freighter twisting out of reach, and the clamps failed to secure. Sparks flew where the enforcer's tools scraped against the hull, but the freighter remained intact. Kale exhaled sharply. He was exhausted, but exhilarated. He was dancing on the edge of disaster and mastering it. Beyond the immediate threat, Kale's actions began to resonate across the corridor. Nearby merchants, traders, and smaller freighters paused to watch the improbable spectacle, a derelict-turned marvel, piloted by a boy, outmaneuvering a fleet designed to dominate the sector. Communications channels lit up with rumors, warnings, and admiration. Some called it madness, others whispered the impossible. The galaxy had never seen a human with such ingenuity, courage, and audacity. Kale pressed forward, charting a course through a field of fractured moons. The corporate fleet pursued, relentless, but every obstacle favored his creativity. Gravity wells, collapsing satellites, and drifting debris became weapons in his hands. He guided the freighter with precision that no algorithm could replicate, improvising in real time. With every evasive maneuver, the freighter transformed from a salvaged vessel into a symbol of human potential. Finally, he reached the edge of the corridor, where the trade lanes opened into open space. Kale initiated the freighter's long-range systems, previously untested, and surged forward with engines fully optimized by his alien modifications. The corporate fleet, massive and formidable, could not keep pace. Their weapons fell short, sensors failed to track the sudden acceleration, and the freighter slipped from their grasp into the expanse of unclaimed stars. In the silence that followed, Kale allowed himself a moment to reflect. The freighter had become more than metal, circuits, or fuel. It was a testament to human ingenuity, perseverance, and vision. He had taken something discarded, forgotten, and transformed it into a vessel capable of astonishing the galaxy. And he had done it alone. Every scar on the hull, every improvised system, every risky maneuver told the story of a human who refused to be limited by circumstance, age, or expectation. Kale's reputation spread faster than he could imagine. Traders in distant sectors whispered of the boy who had outsmarted a fleet, engineers marveled at the freighter's improbable modifications, and news networks highlighted the improbable genius of a teenager who had turned junk into legend. For Kale, it was not about recognition. It was about proof that humans, even the youngest and most overlooked, could rise to challenges that seemed insurmountable, that creativity and courage could redefine what was possible. As he piloted the freighter into uncharted systems, the stars stretched endlessly before him. Kale understood that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers, opportunities, and mysteries that no map could fully capture. Yet he felt ready for all of it, confident that the same ingenuity and determination that had carried him this far would guide him through whatever lay ahead. For the first time in his life, Kale was truly free. The city, the alleys, the hunger, they were all behind him, replaced by infinite possibilities. The freighter hummed beneath his hands, alive in a way that no one had thought possible. It was his partner, his creation, and the vessel through which the galaxy would finally see the potential of humanity. As he adjusted the freighter's course toward a distant nebula, a spark of excitement flared in Kale's chest. The stars were no longer distant dreams. They were destinations. And he was no longer a street orphan. He was a pioneer, an innovator, and a symbol of human tenacity. The galaxy might have doubted him once, but now it would have to reckon with him. Kale leaned forward, eyes shining with determination, as the freighter surged into the unknown. Every mile was a triumph, every star a promise. The journey was far from over, yet he knew with unshakable certainty that he had transformed himself, his vessel, and, in some small but undeniable way, the galaxy itself.